Recording? Yeah. All right. What's good, everyone? Welcome to the Beast Coast Podcast. This is episode 2. My name is Mike. You can check me on Instagram at Southpaw Fitness NY. This is my co-host, G Diesel.
What's up, brother? Awesome to see you. I am the
Likewise.
owner and founder of G Code Nutrition. Just incredibly pumped to be here with you, man. This is our second episode. This is how like, one act, in isolation becomes a thing, is by putting them together, by stacking them on top of each other. So this is our second episode. So we're gaining momentum.
Yeah, it's now a thing. We're doing a thing.
It's awesome. Only way to do it, man. Consistency.
Yeah. So let's just jump right into it.
Yep.
We'll do our Mount Rushmore, which we always do to start off the show.
Yep.
For today, we're going to do our top 4 workout songs. So you want to start us off?
Yeah, man, for sure. I think it's perfect timing, right? As I don't know if you saw, but I believe today is the 30th anniversary of Illmatic, which is arguably the greatest rap album ever made, maybe one of the greatest albums ever made, regardless of genre. Nas's first album came out in 1994 on this date in history. And they actually celebrated by dropping a song, Nas and DJ Premier. Apparently there's a Nas and DJ Premier project on the way, which is like something the world has wanted for a really long time. They're finally getting around to it, which would be dope. But yeah, I think in that spirit, I was, trying to go back to think of the classic albums and songs that I enjoyed in their time, but then proved to be timeless, right? And that I still come back to this day. And that album has many of them, but the one that leaps to mind is New York State of Mind.
Okay.
So Nas, New York State of Mind, which is essentially the opening track of Illmatic, a totally classic album, to me is like an awesome workout song. It builds in strength and intensity. It's melodic. It's like sort of dark and brooding. The beat's hard. Everything. Nas's lyrics are incredibly like aggressive. Just everything about it's amazing. And it's full of like, Nas is really young at that point. It's his first album, and something that I always find inspiring, right, is like aspiration and hunger. And I think that's like one of those things, these intangibles, right, that like this is regardless of genre too. So many artists' greatest work is their very first thing, because they're most motivated and hungry when that thing comes out. And then the other thing, and this is a point that came up before, I can't take credit for it, right? But it's like, if you, just for example, and this isn't a great example, but just for example, if this second episode, right, didn't feel as like intense and powerful as the first one, right, it would be because there was a week between the first episode and the second episode, whereas the time before the first episode was our whole lives.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I feel like that happens a lot with music. So the fact that it's the first track on his first album, I think everything is so infused with aspiration and hunger, and you just kind of feel it. It comes through the speakers, comes through your headphones. And I love that about it. And I felt so strongly about it when I was 16 years old, 15 years old. And I feel that strongly about it to this day. So it's timeless in that way. So that's Nas Illmatic in general, but New York State of Mind in particular as a specific song is my first selection. Not necessarily ranked first, but my first selection for Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. I think the beauty of that whole album was, I think at that time, gangster rap was very popular, right? You had NWA and those guys.
Yep.
And while Nas's first album is a street album, it's more him rhyming about what he's seeing around him.
Absolutely.
He's not glorifying any of it.
No.
He's just reporting on it, and he's reporting on it like in a very poetical way,
Absolutely.
And just the beats are all fire, the lyrics are fire. It's the perfect album.
Yeah, it's a perfect album too, right? Because it was like a dream team of producers all unifying to work on this album around this sort of like what they consider to be this young phenom of an MC who could be like the next great MC. So it lines up all these different producers, whether it's Premier or Large Professor or Pete Rock or Q-Tip, right? All to contribute to this single first album. So it's like there's so many things, like so many things in life are about timing, right? And it's like everything lined up to create that perfect album. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
those producers all having a hand in that first work, I think, is a big part of why it feels the way it feels. And yeah, you're not wrong, man. Right? Is that it's not Nas pretending to be something he's not. Right?
Right.
He's just it's observational, and that makes it feel even more real, and less like fiction, right? Less like
Yep.
fictional drama and more like a real thing, a depiction of what a young artist sees out in the world.
Yeah. I feel like the closest we have to him right now is Kendrick Lamar. I've always felt like his first few albums felt
Yeah,
like Nas albums because he wasn't glorifying violence or drugs or any of that
yeah,
stuff. He's just talking about what's going on in Compton and in his neighborhood.
yeah, yeah. Kendrick Lamar is a perfect example. It's funny because those guys still exist, but it's a matter of it's a matter of finding them first, right? And then once you find them, it's a matter of uh, finding the work that speaks to you specifically that isn't um shrouded in like sort of like a mainstream pop kind of thing, is because I think J. Cole's another great example of
Yep.
that, right? J. Cole is talented on that same Kendrick Lamar level, and obviously it's a lot to say that these guys are as good as Nas, but in terms of contemporary guys, they're
Yep.
the Nas, the Nas, the Jay-Z of this most modern era, and he's another one who doesn't pretend to be something he's not,
Right.
and that that authenticity comes through, that and there's rapper, modern rappers, modern MCs that I like, that I'm fond of, but definitely spend more time sort of glorifying um sort of dark aspects of life and society
Yep.
in a way that maybe isn't the most productive. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And and because of that, especially once these guys are more established, and aren't living that lifestyle anymore, and aren't where they initially started out. Those when you know somebody's sort of living a comfortable lifestyle, but they're still hammering on those same messages, those sort of dark, bleak messages, it doesn't ring as true or authentic anymore, and it feels like almost
Right.
exploitative,
Yeah.
right? But like with J. Cole and Kendrick Lamar, just for example, those are guys who never portrayed that in the first place, so they can continue to sort of evolve as artists.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean that's what hip hop's all about, authenticity.
No,
Doesn't matter
absolutely,
doesn't matter what you're rapping about as long as it's authentic to who you are, people
sure,
are going to dig it.
absolutely, absolutely.
So my number 1 is by a group who does glorify all those aforementioned things.
Of course,
Slam by Onyx, but that song is the top song, but the remix with Biohazard. I don't know if you've heard that
yeah,
one.
of
The
course, I
metal
remember
remix.
that. Sure, sure, sure.
So that I mean, that one's special because I've always been into both hip hop and metal and hardcore and stuff.
Yeah,
And Onyx was one of the first groups I think who incorporated a hardcore aesthetic in their music because
yeah,
most of the lyrics are either sung in an aggressive or said in an aggressive manner or screamed, and then the choruses are all gang vocals. And
yeah,
you didn't see that a lot in hip hop. And then you have a band like Biohazard, who was also from Brooklyn, like Onyx, who was doing more hardcore metal, but with a hip hop element to the music. A lot of their lyrics are rapped throughout the songs. So
yeah,
bringing those two together for the Slam remix and also Secondary Judgment Night
yeah,
was
yeah,
just
sure.
the perfect combination for music and gym music, especially just because it's so aggressive.
The Judgment Night soundtrack. I
Yep.
remember
Yep.
that. Yeah, for sure, for sure. That's those hybrid songs, right? Where it's combining like metal and like hip hop
Yep.
together in one. Yeah, I mean Slam, that initial album, the Back the Fuck Up, that original album with Slam on
Yep.
it, which Slam was like the breakout single. The first song that they came out with, this first single off it, is Throw Your Guns, which
Yep.
is
Yep.
super dark, incredibly intense. Like you said, sort of glorifies all that stuff. But yeah, those guys are amazing. They have an awesome body of work. Um, it's funny that you mentioned Slam because it's probably one of my daughter's my daughter Beans. It's probably one of her top 10 favorite songs. She's
That's
got
awesome.
like she's got these like a hip hop playlist that's her favorite music to listen to before sports, and Onyx Slam is on it. But yeah, no, that Onyx's whole vibe. Um, and it's great because it'll segue to my next selection. But Onyx's whole vibe set the table for in many ways for the music that came after it, right? Which to me
Yep.
is like sort of like the golden era of hip hop, the best hip hop has ever been. Onyx to me is one of the groups that set the table. There's like a transitional period, right? In my opinion, there's like a transitional period for like Run DMC and Eric B and Rakim and Boogie Down Productions and all those guys really sort of solidified what hip hop was, right? And then their success and their talent created a mainstream interest and avenue for MC Hammer, and
Mhm.
for Vanilla Ice, and for that kind of music that got mainstream radio play, right? Will Smith, Fresh Prince, right?
Yep.
The stuff that got mainstream radio play everywhere. And then it almost is like what hair metal was for rock, right? In that it was like sort of frivolous excess in a lot of
Mhm.
ways, right? And there was like an equal and opposite reaction to that music. And Onyx to me is one of those groups who sort of set the table for Nas and Wu Tang and Mobb Deep and Jay Z and some of the music that I think is the best of its time, right? Gangstar, Onyx, um, House of Pain. There and then there's another one that's going to be in my on my Rushmore. But those groups I think sort of set the table for that next generation. Um, yeah, Onyx doesn't get a lot of the credit they deserve, but I think they're way more influential than a lot of people give them credit for
Yeah,
sure.
and the beauty of it is, so they have that breakout album, they're charting on Billboard, the music video is hot, they're playing slam at sporting events, and then
Yeah,
they follow up the album with All We Got's Is Us, which is one of the darkest hip hop albums ever made.
bro. Last Days is one of the greatest songs ever made,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Like one of the best hip hop songs ever made, and it ends up. It's funny, right? Because it ends up on the 8 Mile soundtrack, right?
Mhm.
And it's because Eminem gets it.
Yep.
Eminem was raised by this music like we were, and influenced obviously to such a great extent. And when he's in a position to sort of cherry pick all the best songs and all like the powerful mood songs that inspired him, he chose that for that soundtrack. And you know why? It's just an amazing song, from the lyrics
Yep.
to the production. It's incredible.
Yeah, but there's not a radio hit on that album.
No,
They just went straight dark street. It's almost horrorcore,
yeah,
in the
yeah.
production and the lyrics.
Yeah, that's true, man. It's a very good point, right? It's like they have all the opportunities in the world to sort of go pop, and they didn't.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, that for sure, for sure. That's certainly the case, and there's other instances of that too, right? Like I feel like Method Man was one of those guys too, who when Wu Tang blew up, he came out with the Tikal album, and that was pretty dark and
Yep,
not
yep.
really, there's like the All I Need, Mary J. Blige was like the most mainstream song on there. And it wasn't until they did like radio remixes and stuff that it like caught on, because just in general, that album is very dark. It's not like the, oh, I'm going to be a new pop superstar kind of album, even though he could have.
Mhm.
He's
Yeah.
the hottest single character in the hottest rap group in the world, and instead he comes out with this pretty dark album.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, very similar to Onyx in that way, for sure.
What's your number 2?
All right, so my number two is another one of those table setters, right along with Onyx, who set the table for what I feel like is the best period in the history of hip hop. It's Cypress Hill.
Okay.
How I Could Just Kill a Man. But
Yep.
that whole album, with Hand on the Pump, is another awesome one. But I'll just choose How I Could Just Kill a Man. Something about Cypress Hill's sound is like a crazy confluence of aesthetics and cultures, right? Because it's like it feels very East Coast, right? But they're from California, right?
Mhm.
Their background, they're Mexican, right?
Yep.
And like the sound of their lyrics and the sound of their lyrics, their voices are so unique. Um, the music is so aggressive, so dark. I mean, the title of that song, "How I Could Just Kill a Man," it's crazy.
Mhm.
To think that that was the title of like a single that went pretty mainstream. And then DJ Muggs production. I think DJ Muggs is very underappreciated. Like if you talk about guys who set the table, like Muggs sound to me like made a guy like RZA like more palatable to people because it
Mhm.
yeah, as visionary as what RZA did with Wu Tang, I feel like Muggs' work sort of set the table for him in that way,
Yep.
and that sort of dark, brooding hip hop like sound that's got no shiny glamour to it at all. I think some of Muggs' work is some of the best that's ever been done.
And he's still doing it.
Yeah,
He's
very
still
much so.
making classics.
Yep, yep. No, he's incredible. He's
Yeah,
incredible.
it's funny to think back during that time that all of the popular hip hop songs were it's wild that they were popular. Like Insane
Oh,
in the Brain.
yeah, of course.
How is that a top 40 song? And
I
I
know.
still like I'll DJ events now, like kids dances and parents dances and stuff, and that song gets requested.
Oh,
And people
dude, and it's
dance to
like
it.
that's another song on Beans' top 10 list. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's just amazing. And you know what, man? One of the reasons I think is because it doesn't sound like anything else.
right.
That's the thing, right? Like a lot of this music is like is so unique. Like, the songs that we pointed out, like there was nothing before it that reminded you of it. And that I think that alone, that sort of singular sound and vision and how unique it all was, is one of the reasons that it stood out,
Yep.
and was timeless, and it almost like bullied its way into the mainstream just by being so different and unique. It just stands out. It's like it's neon pink, on a gray tapestry. It's a splash of neon green, and it just stands out so much from everything else that it's impossible to deny it or ignore it.
Yeah.
So it's so unique and different, and it's just all its own thing. You know.
And Muggs helped out with House of Pain, right? I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
he was
yeah,
affiliated with those
yeah,
guys.
yeah, and like House of Pain's one of my favorites, and that's it. They're gonna be on my Rushmore too. There's a song of theirs that's gonna be on my Rushmore too. But funny thing about it, like that second House of Pain album, I think is very underrated, and Muggs is involved in
Yeah.
it. And you listen to some of the production on there, and it's incredible. And you can feel that that Cypress Hill feel to it.
Yeah. And
Um,
I think most of the guys from House of Pain are from New York, and so is Muggs.
right.
So there
Yes.
is that East Coast sound is bleeding through because there's
Yeah.
New York roots there.
Yes, that's the thing, right? And yeah, it's funny, right? It's funny how heavily the production, um, that East Coast style of production just creates this tone that's
Mhm.
so different than the West Coast vibe. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And especially the West Coast music from that era, just there's like a night and day difference, and that's like before the Chronic and Snoop Dogg and all that stuff. It's before that. It's just slightly before that stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and it had, and like, and then you think about NWA, like NWA's second album, and you think about the Chronic, and you think about Dr. Dre's sound, and Dr. Dre's sound is even though West Coast you feel like is impacted by some of that Muggs vibe, you know.
Yep. Yeah.
He's just so influential. It's crazy. Like you can't overstate it. You know.
Yeah. So my 2 is, they're an affiliate of Cypress Hill, the Psycho Realm. You
Oh wow.
familiar with
Okay.
those
Yeah.
guys?
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I
So
guess I do know Psycho Realm. Sure.
so there's a song on their first album called Showdown,
Okay.
and Be Real is on that track,
Okay. Awesome.
and that song sounds like LA gang culture. Like,
Wow.
it's I don't know if they were affiliated with any gangs or anything, but I mean, go listen to it after the podcast. It's dark. It's almost sounds like Nas speaking about LA gang culture and what's
Right.
going on
Wow.
in the streets of LA. And
Awesome.
the Be Real guest verse on it is sick and just um again, a really, really dark song though.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that says something about us.
No, well, you know what though? But the thing is, though, right, is that because like the other two songs I'm gonna pick are dark also. So and you think to yourself, well, what's that all about? Like, why is all this music so dark? But man, it's because when you're talking about like hard training, serious training, there's like it's about channeling like your own internal aggression,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know. So um it makes sense when you hear like about guys who listen to metal all the time when they train because it's aggressive and it's dark and it suits a mindset that helps you to push yourself, right? Um, I'm more like I always say like I've listened to hip hop every day since 1986, right? But
Uh,
like that's the genre of music that I love the most, that speaks to me the most, that is like the soundtrack to my life, and that sort of dark aspirational feeling that it has, combined with like its melodic nature and the fact that um it's this the confluence of production with lyrics, and how the lyrics can be inspiring, but then just the tone of a song can be inspiring. And I think those things working together are one of the reasons that they're so like suitable for hard training,
right. Yeah.
for sure, for sure. But yeah, but it's like it's the same feeling that metal has. It's just a different art form, or a different genre. But it's that same sort of angst, and it's that same sort of like angst and aggression, right?
Hmm.
It's just uh, presented in a different way. The same human emotion. It's just presented in a different way.
Yeah. I have a theory that back back probably around the Onyx time and when things started getting dark in hip hop, there's
Yep.
also another culture going on in like the New York hardcore scene. And I think back then things were more segregated in music and in culture, but I think the white kids gravitated towards New York hardcore. It was saying a lot of the same things as hip hop was, and the black and brown kids went to hip hop.
Yeah.
But they had a common bond in the themes on their music, and it was, again, very dark, but just speaking about life in the inner city.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Right. It's about right. It's about hopelessness and despair, and then the flip side of that, right? Like aspiring to uh, escape, right? Aspiring to escape the hopelessness and
Yep.
despair, right? And
Yep.
where do you find meaning in life, and all of those things, So yeah, there's a million common threads. It makes perfect sense. And
Yeah.
a little bit of like indignation, a little bit of like fuck the system, those feelings,
Yep.
those the oppression, feeling oppressed, feeling held down by circumstance.
Yep.
Those are very powerful feelings, especially, I mean, for any human being, but especially when you think of a channel through like somebody in their late teens or early 20s. It's a very powerful human emotions. For
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
What's your number three?
All right, so number three might be my favorite group ever.
Okay.
Um, I was going. It would be easy for me to pick a track off of their most popular album, which to me might be my favorite album ever. But the group is Mobb Deep,
Yep.
and the song that I love is from the Sunset Park soundtrack.
Hmm.
You know the song I speak of?
I haven't heard it in ages, but I used to
It's
have that
called
soundtrack.
"Back at You."
Hmm.
Um, It's gone. Hold on, I'm googling it to make sure I have it right, because there's right back at you and back at you. Yeah, okay. So it's back at you. Right back at you, I believe, is the song from the Infamous that has Raekwon and Ghostface on it.
Okay.
Right, Raekwon and Ghostface appear on the Infamous twice. They're on Eye for an Eye with Nas and Havoc and Prodigy, and then there's Right Back at You, which is Havoc and Prodigy with Nas with Ghostface and Raekwon. That's Right Back at You. But from the Sunset Park soundtrack is Back at You. And the crazy thing about this song, as amazing as it is, right, is that it has a music video. It's on this, for context, for anybody who didn't live through it, right? The one of the big things in that era was the soundtrack, where these films are made, and then some of these films have these just star-studded soundtracks, right? Where the
Yep.
soundtracks, where it is almost as if the film studios were outsourcing the soundtracks to the music studios, and the music studios were creating like a showcase for all their best artists, a lot of the time with original music. So this is from a movie called Sunset Park. And the song is called Back at You, but I don't believe you can find it on any of the streaming platforms. It's
I was
just
just looking, it's not there.
on YouTube.
Okay.
But the funny thing is that it's on YouTube with an actual music video. So like the song was like sort of a big deal in its time. And then like if you were going on like iTunes or whatever, you're not going to find it, which is weird to me. It's got to be some kind of licensing thing, something in legal must have held it up that soundtrack isn't widely available. But the song's on YouTube, and it's maybe my favorite Mobb Deep song ever. And Mobb Deep is maybe my favorite hip hop group ever. So yeah, just an incredible song, and it's got so much of the stuff, so many of the elements that we talked about. Right? It's awesome lyricism. It's dark. It's brooding. Production's amazing. Just an awesome song. Highly recommended song.
Does that soundtrack have Pour Out a Little Liquor? Is that the soundtrack by Thug Life, Tupac's group?
Let's look it up.
I'm trying to think
because this in real time.
Yeah.
Let's see. Sunset Park original motion picture soundtrack. Let's see. High Till I Die, Tupac. It's got a Dog Pound. All right, so we were talking about, right, like how these are showcases, right?
Mm-hmm.
For these groups. So it's Tupac, the Dog Pound, Aaliyah, Queen Latifah, Junior Mafia, which was Biggie's group,
yep.
Onyx, Ghostface, the Mobb Deep song I talked about. That's about it.
Yeah, it's not on there.
That anybody's gonna get really excited about, but like that's like a star-studded. Especially you think about there's Tupac on there, there's Aaliyah on there. Crazy soundtrack. All right, so what was the song you were asking about?
Pour Out a Little Liquor by Thug Life. It was on a different
Yep.
A different basketball movie soundtrack. It wasn't Sunset Park.
All right.
What was the other movie? Tupac was in the movie, I think.
Above the Rim.
Yeah, Above the Rim. That's it.
Yep. Above the Rim is just another example of like these soundtracks that are just like these showcases that have like some songs that are jewels and like some iconic artists on them, you know. And sometimes I guess if you weren't wired to like really dig in the crates or pay attention, like there's a good chance that you might have. It might be 30 years later or 25 years later when this music came out initially, and you might love a specific artist and not even know that they have a song on a soundtrack, mm-hmm. right? Like, and could be your favorite song ever. You don't even know, you know?
Yeah.
Pretty crazy.
I've never thought about that before, because nowadays soundtracks are pulling some of the greatest hits by artists and throwing them on there because they're using the song in the movie. Back then, it was all new material.
Yes. You know, and and we used a good example of, right, like 8 Mile was a movie that has these classic songs, but then Eminem's an artist, so Eminem's making music for it. But it's very much the case, right? That like it's hard to even imagine a film coming out now and there's like a soundtrack that has all different artists on it, right? Like that would be incredibly cool, but it feels like a thing of the past.
Yeah,
you know. And like I said, there's songs out there that are jewels, and there are these soundtracks too that you even forgot existed, right? Or like, you know, like you're mistaking Sunset Park for Above the Rim, but like that, there's 100 examples of that. You know, mm-hmm. if you stop and you think about it, there's a movie about spoken word poetry called Slam.
Yep.
With Saul Williams. Do you remember that movie?
Mm-hmm.
Saul Williams, who's like a spoken word poet, a very famous one, and would do like spoken word poetry, but with like musical backdrops and whatever. And he stars in this indie film, and it's got Slam has this soundtrack, and the soundtrack is insane. Like a bunch of incredible, like luminary, iconic artists, all on this kind of like gritty spoken word poetry soundtrack album, you know. And there's got to be 100 of those from that era, you know, from the mid 90s. Really cool.
Yeah, I had that soundtrack. I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah,
it is. It had Black Rob was on there, Goody Mob, Nori.
That Goody Mob song is incredible. That Goody Mob song is incredible. It's got Estero, which is like they're like a European like trip hoppy R&B group.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's an awesome song. It's got Big Pun on it. It's got Nori. It's got Q-Tip.
Yeah, I got to go back
Um,
and check this one out.
yeah, it's got Capadonna and Takitha. Takitha's a girl who used to sing for Wu-Tang. Busta Rhymes is on it. Brand Nubian. Mobb Deep.
Yep.
The Dead Prez song is incredible on there. Like, so cool. And like that's like a it's like a forgotten jewel.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's probably 50 of those. And there's ones that you've heard that I don't know, and there's ones that I've heard that you don't know. And there's like I said, there's tracks on some of these songs that you either forgot about or never knew existed in the first place, and we were into it. So crazy.
It's a forgotten time. You'd go into Tower Records or whatever and browse through the CDs and the vinyls and all that.
And the singles.
Yep.
Right. And the singles. And like also too, like in an era where you didn't have the music on demand, right? Like we do now, it's almost unthinkable, right? But like you would buy that $15 CD just because it's got the one song on it from a group you like, and then you hope that it was worth the $15. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of that going on,
Yeah.
Crazy.
And you listen to the whole CD from front to back, so you just spent money on it. We don't really do that anymore.
No, we don't. No, absolutely not. And I mean, and it's a shame because I love that experience, but it might either be a combination of just the way we consume music now, but also I think it's the nature of the beast in terms of attention span, right? And like to just sit there and listen to an album that you could just easily skip through, or just cherry pick the obvious songs that you like out of the playlist. Whereas before, like it was an experience to listen to a whole album as it was presented, and you wonder if music is even created in that same way now. If it's just like thought of as a bunch of tracks put together, or about the experience of consuming an entire album like in sequence.
Right. All right, I'll hop into my third. Eminem, The Way I Am.
Awesome.
Just because I think the beat goes super hard, but his cadence and his flow is. I don't know that anyone else had done that type of flow before. The way he rides the beat, and it just works so well. And the subject matter and his delivery is pissed off and frustrated, and I think it was probably the first song where there wasn't like a funny pun here or there, or funny wordplay. It was all straightforward and super aggressive, and just obviously pumps you up for the gym. But he has a really good line in there that my son recently got into Eminem because I think they did a Fortnite skin on him, and now he wants to know who Slim Shady is, and that's all he listens to.
Yep.
But there's one he's talking about school shootings, and he says now it's a tragedy. Now it's so sad to see an upper class city having this tragedy, saying like these shootings have been going on in lower class neighborhoods for forever. Once it happens in the rich white neighborhood,
now everybody's paying attention. Now it's so sad. Now it's tragic, right? And they try to blame Eminem and Marilyn Manson for it, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. Very telling, man. Very strong.
Me and you had both lived through Columbine, where Marilyn Manson was like public enemy number one.
Yep, I remember it to this day, man. I remember it so well, man. It's crazy. And you think about, how much that moment has impacted just modern society, and how like much more common that sort of stuff is, and what it is to have our kids in school. I'm sure it's commonplace, but my daughters have lockdown drills at school.
Yep.
It's just commonplace, and it's commonplace. It's not that they're cool with it or that it's no big deal to them. It's traumatic for them, but it's commonplace in our society. It's crazy.
Yeah, I remember during COVID when the kids went back to school and they had to wear masks, and a bunch of parents were pissed off and protesting, "Oh, you're going to screw up our kids, and they're going to be messed up for life from wearing masks in school." It's like, dude, we have these kids hiding in the closet, scared of a gunman. You're doing lockdown drills. That's going to fuck them up. Not wearing a mask.
Talk about not seeing the forest for the trees, right? Like we're worried about masks, man. It's like,
bigger problems.
I remember feeling that exact same way. Like, talk about your concerns being misdirected, or your concerns, your issues, your worries about your kids. Just you're putting it on the wrong thing. You're using that energy the wrong way.
Yeah,
for sure.
Crazy. What's number 4 for you?
See, I'm torn. I'm torn. I'm torn. I'm gonna go with. I had a House of Pain one that's awesome, but I got it. I'm gonna stick to the four just for in the name of Mount Rushmore. Um, and I'm not gonna try to slide two in my last pick. So I'm gonna go with Wu Tang because I've listened to Wu Tang so much while I train. A song called Wu Gambinos
Okay.
from Only Built for Cuban Links from Raekwon's album, which is kind of like a posse cut on Raekwon's album. Um, that features like Method Man, features several different guys in Wu Tang on it, but just has this crazy vibe that builds, and it's got like a piano riff that's very RZA, and I don't know, Method Man. Method Man just tends to get me hyped in general, and his verse is awesome on it. So that whole album in general, like I talked about Mobb Deep earlier, and like Mobb Deep the Infamous, if you just like gave me that album and that was what I have to listen to while I train, like I don't need a playlist. I could just listen to that album.
Mhm.
I feel the same way about Only Built for Cuban Links. It's probably my favorite Wu Tang album, and it's so atmospheric. The music in general just feels crazy. It feels so different and so unique and so singular in its vision. And it's dark and aggressive, but it's like stylized too in a way that's really cool. And that song is one of my favorites off of there. So that album's got several songs that I love, but that's just an example of one that's awesome to train to.
Yeah, that one, it was 36 Chambers, Cuban Links, and then Iron Man, or like the trifecta of just classic hip hop albums.
Oh man, yeah, and you know, and like, and you know, in between there is Method Man's album, his Old
Yep.
Dirty's album, is the Jizza is Genius's album,
Yeah, you know what? All of them. All, not even the
all of
trifecta,
them.
all of them.
No, it's like such a run. You think about like one producer. It's like one producer's vision. It's all RZA, and it's like a run of like from 36 Chambers to Wu Tang Forever, and like all the music that he made in between there. Probably like a 200 song run. That's like, you know, obviously there's like there's ebbs and peaks or however peaks and valleys throughout that 200 song run, but like it's a pretty incredible run, and at certain points it's like flawless,
Mhm.
and it's like one guy's vision just kind of like hammering, you know, with all these different artists, like sort of changing his aesthetic depending on who the artist is within this group, within this collective. But so much of that music is amazing, and like once again, like a lot of those albums I could just take and just listen to on their own. You know, when I brought up the Geniuses album, it's got two songs back to back that like could definitely be on my training Rushmore, right? Where it's got shadow boxing with Method Man, and then Fourth Chamber with RZA and Ghostface back to back, and those songs are just like astoundingly amazing, and they're like hype songs, and they're dark and eerie and all that. So like those are great training songs too. But Wu Tang, you know, you could just make a Wu Tang training mixtape that would blow the doors off, you know?
Yeah. The whole 36 Chambers album could be a
Yeah.
training mixtape.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Um,
Absolutely.
all right, I'll hop into my fourth. I got to
Okay.
give metal some love, because
Okay.
that's, I love hip hop, but I also listen to a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
metal and hardcore.
Yep.
The band's called Kill Switch Engage. I don't know if you've heard of them. They've been huge for a
I
while.
absolutely have heard of them. Yeah.
So
Yep.
they back back probably when I was in college, it was when like metalcore started getting popular. And metalcore is a genre of metal where, you know, there's aggressiveness and screaming, but there's also clean melodic choruses, like a lot of hip hop songs actually.
Sure.
And they had a song called Rose of Sharon, which was the first metalcore song I'd ever heard.
Right.
I was just completely blown away, like, what is this music?
Yeah.
And then, you know, looking into the band, the lead singer is like this big black dude, which is rare for at that time for a metal singer.
Right. It's genre bending, right? Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
genre bending.
Yeah.
And he also, you know, he obviously lifted because he was a bigger dude.
Right.
So it works with training. And I
Yeah.
think the the way the song builds from aggressiveness to clean singing and being melodic is similar to when you're training and you feel that runner's high, you
Yeah.
know, and you
Yep.
get that really good feeling that washes over you.
Yep. Yep.
Um, you know, I think they go hand in hand during a training session.
Awesome. No, it's all right. I'm gonna check it out now. I'm gonna check it for sure. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I gotta
check it
send
out.
you a couple things. Yeah.
I'm glad he switched it up too because it was all hip hop.
Yeah.
But like if I think about like metal, like not metal's the wrong word, but let's just use rock. That's a wrong word too, but whatever. However you want to classify this, like in terms of music to train to, that's not hip hop that I think is great. Like Rage Against the Machine is great to train to. There's
Yes.
like that first album, especially both their first two albums, but the first album especially is like that's incredible training music, and it's got it's got some hip hop elements to it, obviously, but it's also like really aggressive with the drums and the guitar and stuff. So
Mhm.
that's another example of non hip hop that's awesome to train to for sure.
And the singer of that group, Zach De La Roca, I think he's a super underrated MC.
Oh, for sure.
Like he's rapping the whole time. Like there's a couple screams here and
Oh,
there, but Rage Against the Machine is almost a hip hop group with live instruments.
there's no doubt. They absolutely are. They absolutely are for sure. Um, and it's like you look back and you think about like Rage Against the Machine and how influential they were, and there's sort of like there's social stances, and they talk about music with substance, right? And the combination of two genres there. An example that I always use of that, and it's not necessarily to say rock, and it's certainly not metal or anything in that realm, but I always say like um, the Roots, right, with Black Thought as
Yep.
the front man, right? Like Black Thought, you could make the argument that he's the greatest living MC, right? Like, and you were talking about Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole, like
Mhm.
he's right there with those guys,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
He's been around a long time, and he's like as great now as he ever was. And I used to say like just about the Roots, especially since they were from Philly, and I went to school in Philly. I have like some Philly roots, South Jersey where I grew up. Like it's very Philly.
Yep.
Um, so like there's a lot of people who are really fond of the Roots, or who I would be stunned when they didn't listen to the Roots. I'm like, man, they're like a backyard hometown group, and you don't listen to them? Like, what?
Yeah.
What are you kidding me? But I would say that like the best, in my opinion, like you could argue the best rock band in the world just happened to have an MC as their frontman. Like the
Mhm.
Roots are that good, that talented, make that kind of like timeless music, and their frontman just so happens to be like an all-time MC, a Mount Rushmore MC, you could argue.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw them live back when I was in high school at PNC Art Center in
Awesome.
Jersey, and it was insane. They were
Yeah.
so good live.
Yeah. I saw him live. I've seen him live a few times, and yeah, amazing. I saw Wu-Tang live with Rage Against the Machine in Camden,
Ooh, that's
and
awesome.
also at the Meadowlands. I saw him multiple times on that same tour. But there's like an outdoor amphitheater. I don't know what it's called right now in Camden. It's been called a bunch of
I know
stuff
what
over
you're
the
talking
years.
about. Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw the Roots there as well, and they were amazing. They were amazing.
Yeah.
There was another music note I had. Something you said triggered me to think of, but I don't know. It eludes me at the moment.
You lost it.
I'll come out of nowhere when I remember it and throw us off track later on.
That's fine. That's what this show's all
Yeah,
about.
of course, of
All right.
course.
Hop into our next topic.
Yes.
Neil Curry. He passed away. What did September was it
Right. Right. Right.
of last year?
Yes, you reminded me of this tragedy. The kind of stuff that you feel like happens a little. I mean, anytime it would happen, but it happens all too often
Yep.
in bodybuilding. But a young man who otherwise should be in great health passed away at what age? Early 30s.
34, I think 33, 34, early 30s.
Tragic.
But his parents just released a statement saying, while his death was from, I guess, ODing on cocaine and methamphetamines, that steroids were the real reason he passed away. They said in recent months before his death, he had, I guess, increased his usage and he became very isolated from his friends and his family, and he was having some mental issues.
Sure.
And what I wanted to discuss was, I think in bodybuilding and fitness, not enough is talked about what happens when you essentially take too many hormones
Right.
and how that affects you mentally. And, as someone such as yourself who's been in this game for a long time, I'm
Yeah.
sure you've hung out with the top bodybuilders and you've been friends with these guys. And,
Sure.
it's, I think it's rarely spoken about.
Man, what's funny, right? Not funny, but crazy or ironic, or you just don't think about, right? Is that oftentimes with any sports, but especially with bodybuilding and strength sports or whatever, like people always place an emphasis on genetics,
Mhm.
right? Like your genetics, how important the role genetics plays, obviously in any aspect of life, in any athletics, but most especially they always talk about it with bodybuilding, right? And now like genetics is what separates the very, very best guys who like compete in the Olympia from the next tier of guys who might train harder, who might be more dedicated, more committed, but they don't have the genetics. And one of the things that you realize and that you point out, or that I point out, is that one of these genetic components that is overlooked or not even talked about is how you hold up to the drugs needed to compete on that level. How does your body and what we're talking about now and your mind, right, stand up to that kind of extreme hormonal manipulation, right?
Right.
And where one guy might use X drugs in X fashion for this amount of time and be completely fine, completely healthy, live a long life, have kids, have good blood work for the rest of their life, and have no real side effects. And then the other guy might, have organ failure in his 30s, right? And have
Mhm.
to deal with a complicated health history, if not worse, for the rest of his life, right? And it's like it's because their genetics were such that their body could hold up to that kind of excess in a way that the next guy couldn't. And I feel like it's the same way when we're talking about the mind, right? And the fact that our endocrine system is so directly related to the function of the brain and how, using the phrase I used earlier about peaks and valleys, right? These hormonal peaks and valleys have such a profound impact on like you and I in our everyday life, right? And how think about how like chemically, this is strong wording, right? But like I know I'm chemically addicted to training, right?
Mhm.
How my body doesn't quite feel right if I don't push myself physically on a daily basis, right? I
Yep.
feel sluggish. I don't feel as sharp mentally. Maybe I'm whether I know it or not, maybe I'm depressed, right? All these things, right? It impacts my mood. It impacts my sleep. It impacts 100 other factors in my life if I got my workout in today or not, right?
Yep. Yep.
Sense of self, sense of well-being, sense of accomplishment, all these things, right? Oh, I didn't get my workout in the back of your mind, you're thinking, oh man, I fucking slacked off. I'm an
Yep.
average Joe, right? Right? Or even worse thoughts, right? And that's just you and I. Now, imagine you and I with all of those same sort of, predilections and addictions to training. And now you're adding in the hormonal element to it, right? And how you're introducing supraphysio. This goes for men and women too, and can be, I would imagine, incredibly profound in women, right? But you're adding in supraphysiological amounts of these hormones, then your body tries to regulate itself, right? Your body always seeks homeostasis, right? So
Mhm.
your body's going to shut down its own production of testosterone because it's trying to seek balance, and there's so much excess. And then you come off the stuff, and now you're not producing any at all,
Right.
right? You're in this tremendous hormonal deficit, and the implications on your emotional well-being of that roller coaster ride hormonally are so profound, man. And it's like you think about like um, instances of suicide or overdoses or instances of people doing rash things, violence, these sort of things, right? And how they can so clearly, obviously, be related to their hormones being so far out of whack
Mhm.
and spiking, and then dipping and just being on that roller coaster. That endocrine internal roller coaster. It's scary, and it's not surprising that it manifests itself in these tragedies.
Yeah. And it's if you look at a steroid stack from a top level competitor, it's like holy shit,
Yeah,
the dosages. And you go to a TRT clinic, and what they prescribe you for your week is what these guys are taking per day, if not
sure,
more, of just
sure,
one of the drugs. And then they're
sure.
stacking 5 or 6 on top of it, that some of them are used for cows, like Trembolone, right? Trembolone
Of
isn't
course,
for humans, that's to
right? Yes,
make cattle grow.
right.
So These
And
things
it's
are
one of the
gonna
most
mess you up.
popular with young people too, because it's like sexier and considered hardcore and edgier, right? So young people it appeal to the use of trend, and it's like, you know, also one of the harshest hormones
Yeah.
they use, you know?
Yeah. I had a buddy who asked me, he was like, he hopped on TRT and he's like, dude, I think I want to do trend. And I'm like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
No, never. Of all of them, that's the last one you should be doing.
Yeah.
Especially, you're not trying to compete. You're just trying
Right.
to look good for summer. Just diet, dude.
That's no, that's it, right? And you know, there's another thing, right? Another genetic implication of this all, right? We're talking about your body's ability to hold up to like hormonal excess, right? Your ability to manage your mind in that internal environment, right? But then also, right, another genetic component is your body's ability to efficiently utilize these hormones, right?
Yeah.
And how bodybuilder A might only need a quarter of the drug that bodybuilder B needs to get the same results, right? And as such, they're only taking so many risks as comparison in comparison to the same guy to another guy who has to use so much more, right?
Mhm.
And it's like that's another genetic implication, right? Like because you look at some of these guys and you know there's a lot of guys out there who I feel like they have no reason to lie,
Yeah.
right? Who will talk frankly about the drugs that they use, and then you see them constantly be called liars,
Mhm.
right? And it's like, okay, well, what if they're not lying? Like, what if they just are hyper responders to this stuff, and you know they only needed 250 milligrams of something that some other guy took 2,000 milligrams of to get the same result, or not even the same result, right? And it's like that's a genetic component of this stuff too, you know. And it's like
Yeah.
I think that's lost on some people. Like I think one of the reasons that some bodybuilders uh, compete on a really high level, but then live long, healthy lives, is because they didn't have to use as much stuff because their body is just better and more efficient in utilizing those drugs, and they get more out of it. You know, the next guy's
Right.
got to use 10 times the amount just to compete. You
Mhm.
know, yeah,
And they know when to come off it.
that too, right?
Some guys stay on just way too long.
Of
And
course,
that's a
and that,
mental aspect of it also because the guy doesn't want to get small. Right.
no,
So
of course, and then we also talk about that hormonal roller coaster, right? And that if someone is taking boatloads of this stuff and then comes off of it, and now they have no production of their own, like there's protocols that need to be followed to ensure that that roller coaster is less extreme, that dip, ebb and flow is less extreme, right? And that they are able to switch back on their own natural production sooner. And if they don't follow that and they just kind of go from like blasting this stuff to cold turkey, like, you know, it's like a nightmare hormonally. And it's like, no wonder it manifests itself in these kind of like tragic outcomes.
yeah.
It's terrible to see, man. Terrible to see. And you know, the other thing too, right? Like this is gonna sound square and conservative. So forgive me for that. But I think you'll follow me too, right? Is that like, you know, if it turns out that this young man, right, was using recreational drugs also, right? And the recreational drugs contributed to
Yep.
his death, right? I feel like in a world where it becomes so commonplace to inject performance-based drugs,
Mhm.
to use to pop performance enhancement pills, right? To be on protocols for these things. Uh Attitudes get relaxed about utilizing other compounds for other specific purposes, right? It's like, okay, well, I need this to focus. I need this to be productive. I need this to sleep. I need this to have a good time. I need this to relax. And it's like, okay, well, if this class of drugs makes me stronger, perform better, um, be in better condition, burn body fat better, right? If I utilize these specific drugs to be able to reach those results, well, there's got to be drugs that help me with those other things, right?
Right.
And now and so you're just troubleshooting, problem solving in your daily life, and all of a sudden you're incorporating other things into your lifestyle that maybe you otherwise wouldn't, just
Yeah.
because your understanding of what it is to perform on a high level is so interwoven with utilizing various compounds and various drugs and pharmaceuticals. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure you've seen it at a lot of the shows and stuff. Yeah, these I'm not talking the highest level guys, but
Yeah,
the guys who were in the fitness industry who may not drink beer because it has calories, they're doing other shit,
of
you
course,
know,
of course,
the
of course.
calorie-free versions.
No, of course, and you think about all that stuff and like, whether it be GHB or cocaine or whatever those
Yep,
other compounds are, right? Or painkillers, right?
yep,
Pharmaceutical painkillers, and opiates and that stuff. What a epidemic that's been in our country, right, for decades now.
mhm,
Um, and just how, like I said, when your attitudes are so relaxed about using compound X, Y, and Z, it's not that much of a stretch anymore to try A, B, and C for other purposes. I don't think.
right,
Just
right.
that it feels just like human nature to me. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, you're like, "I'm injecting, why not inject something else or
right?
take another
That's gonna
pill?"
help me sleep or help me feel better, or it's gonna or I'm training like such a freak and a lunatic, or I have so much mileage on my joints and tendons and ligaments and all that that I have chronic pain. How can I manage it? How can I manage that chronic pain and still continue to perform on a high level? Right? Like a lot of this stuff is just practical. It's not about like, oh man, let's go get high. That's not
Mhm,
even what we're talking about here. It's like, oh, I
yeah,
can't sleep, I can't relax, I'm in pain.
yep,
What's available to me to manage that?
mhm,
And that's, like I said, that's just human nature. So
yeah,
I get it and I see how that can happen, you know?
yeah. I've
For
kind of an
sure.
aside here to this, that
Yeah.
fits into the topic though. When
Yep.
I first started at Muscle and Fitness, I was, mid-20s. I was naive to the drug use in the industry and, what it takes to get cover ready or what it takes to step on stage. And I think I was doing the keto diet or something. I just
Right.
wanted to look better, younger
Sure.
guy.
Yep.
Um, and the editor in chief, Sean Perrine at the time,
Yeah.
who's since passed away, unfortunately, he always came over to talk to me and asked me how my training was going, diet, stuff like that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm dieting. I feel like fucking garbage. I'm having trouble in the gym. And what is that guy? And I pointed to one of the covers. What does he have to do to look
Yeah.
like that?
Sure.
And he's like, Mike, that guy on the cover feels like absolute shit during that cover shoot. He's
Sure.
depressed. He's like basically near death because he's so
Right.
dehydrated and isn't getting the proper caloric intake.
Right.
And he said one of the best fitness and he's gave me one of the best fitness advice, and it's so simple. He's like, "There's a difference between looking good and feeling good.
Right.
They're not synonymous." He's like, "Those
Right.
guys you see on stage do not feel good. They look good, but they feel like garbage."
For sure.
And it's
For sure. No, for sure. Right. They like the best that you'll ever look might be the worst you'll ever feel. Right. Like,
exactly, yeah,
yeah, I think that's very true. Right. Whether it's guys on stage or guys like you're saying getting ready to, be at a cover, a photo shoot or whatever. It's very true, right? The best that they might look in this image that's going to live forever. You know, they might not have been. They might have one felt terrible. Two, their health. They might not have. It might have been the least healthy they've been too.
right, yeah,
You know, it's crazy to think, man. And like there's part of me that's uh naive and you know um I'm still not naive's not the right word, right? But like I still have like certain ideals intact, right? And it's a certain level of, I guess, naive idealism, right? But just the thought that like at one point back in the day, bodybuilding was and weightlifting was about health,
mhm,
right? It was like, and you look at like Steve Reeves and guys like that from 60 years ago, but like they they looked strong and they looked healthy and they could perform on a really high level and they had awesome physiques, but they were the picture of health
right,
as opposed to a picture of health and strength and vitality and all of those things, right? As opposed to and not to make more of it than it is, right? But it had full heads of hair and all that
yeah,
kind of stuff, right? Like and and there's something to be said for that, right? They had balanced diets, and they're just ultra consistent in what they did. and you look back at that and think to yourself, like, you know, there's a room for in this subculture for, like you said, feeling your best, right? Not only looking great, not only be right, looking great is a relative term anyway, but being happy with how you look, right, and how you're performing, but then also feeling good, right?
Mhm.
Feeling good, like having your body function in a positive way, having your mind in a good place, you know, sleeping well, all those things. Like there's a lot to be said for that, man. A lot to
Yeah.
be said for that.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
think it's lost or hidden in today's age.
Yeah. At one point, this was supposed to be about health.
Yeah,
You know?
it's not healthy. None of it's
I
healthy.
mean, well, right, and it's about the pursuit of whatever excellence is on your own individual terms, right? So,
Mhm.
like, yes, I think the uh, like penultimate elite level of bodybuilding is far from healthy, unfortunately.
Right.
Unfortunately, but
And
there's still and you know, and there's guys who aspire who operate on that level who aren't even competing on that sort of level or reaping the benefits of it, who are also, you know, not healthy, or not living a healthy lifestyle. And then you look, you think to yourself, all right, but like, what does excellence on my own personal terms means?
right.
And maybe it means that you can balance those things. You
Mhm.
know, I'd like to think you can, and we can, and like it's one of those things, man. It's like I want to be in the gym 30 years from now.
Yeah.
You know, like I want to be training all the time 30 years from now, 40 years from now. I want to be the guy who's like 80 and you're like, oh, I got the jack. Like he's
Right.
doing it right. Like I want to be that guy, you know. And if
Yeah.
you're gonna be that guy, then you have to plan accordingly, you know,
Right.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Can't burn the candle at both ends.
No, no, you can't. And it's easy enough to happen, you know, just with your lifestyle in general. And then you add in, you know, the physiological stress of training consistently. It's like, all right, well, how do I continue to push myself and strive for excellence physically, but strike that balance where I'm putting my health first and longevity, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's hop into our last topic for today.
Yeah, man.
There's a there's a trend that's been going on for a little while with quote unquote influencers and personalities on Instagram going into a
Sure.
grocery store,
Yep.
having somebody film them where they pick a food aisle and grab a product and just essentially demonize it and tell their audience that this product will kill you.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of it's seed oils, I feel like,
Sure.
and just random things. It's fear mongering for likes and engagement.
Oh man, bro, I just recently, this is just one example, but I just recently saw a video. And it's funny because it's not just those influencers, but it's an entire culture and army of the people who love these influencers,
Right.
who are part of this movement, right? And a perfect example is that there was some other influencer, right? And he wasn't necessarily spreading any kind of negativity, but he was essentially just talking about, and like this was considered radical, right? By some people. He was essentially talking about how like he had gotten into incorporating like cereal in his post workout.
Mhm.
So instead of like having some kind of carbs mixed with his protein shake, he would like mix a protein shake in a bowl of cereal. So there is carbs in like
Yep.
a delicious, easy to consume, inexpensive, uh, easily accessible, convenient way. Some enjoyment in his life, right?
Yep. Yep.
With some protein, and that was what he would have post workout. And I saw, and he was like, big dude, jacked. I'm sure, like, making 100 other choices that maybe aren't ideal, but
Oh,
this was his approach for post workout. And the comments about how he's killing himself eating this poison.
right.
And it was like, dude, it was like rice, it was like Cocoa Krispies.
Uh-huh.
It's like, and I sat there and I thought to myself, like, really? Like that's what's killing him is his post workout bowl of cereal with his protein shake. Like that's gonna kill him.
Right.
That's he's just filling his body with deadly chemicals. Like that was the rhetoric. And I'm
Mhm.
like, dude, really? Like that's what this guy needs to worry about. That's the advice that he's giving that is so harmful for society or for our culture at large is to have some Cocoa Krispies with your protein shake after you train. Like you would have swore this guy was telling 13-year-old kids to take Tren,
Right.
you know? Like you would have swore, right? Or like to drink Jack Daniels pre-workout. Like that was like the how people were responding to this guy talking about cereal with his protein shake. And I
Right.
thought to myself, oh man, like just talk about like this alarmist kind of like mindless
Uh-huh.
Like you're saying, people who just bought into the fear mongering.
Yeah, and they follow these people. It's like a cult.
Oh,
Now,
it is a cult, bro. It is a cult. I've I want you to elaborate. I don't want to elaborate, but I've read things about like if you're talking about like human psychology, one
mhm,
of the most powerful kinds of like group think um sort of culthood type behavior and mindsets are related to diet.
yep,
Like right next to like religious cults is diet cults, food
uh-huh,
cults. People feel so strongly.
yeah.
Get so caught up.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I saw, another supplement company posted a picture of the ingredients on their either their vitamins or their testosterone booster, and the source of vitamin B, I guess one of the gurus said came from cyanide. And I'm sure you know about this, right?
Okay.
And the comment section was all, "Oh, we're not taking this product anymore because it has cyanide in it."
Ugh,
I was like, "Dude, look into it. Don't just
yeah.
take this guy for his word
Yeah.
for it." It's so insane.
Right. It was probably like one of the B vitamins, like cyanocobalamin or
That I think it was
something,
that
like
one. Yeah,
methylcobalamin, and somebody's like, "Oh, the methylated versions are so far superior." And
yeah.
cyanocobalamin uses cyanide to synthesize. It's like, come on, like crazy.
It's insane. It's the same with sucralose, right? Sucralose is, yeah, it gave cancer to rats, but the rats took what, 100 servings a day for the equivalent of 100 servings a day for 100 years, and then developed
Right,
cancer.
right, and right, and the thought of like to make it like an equivalent. I feel like I had this conversation recently, but like an equivalent um amount of aspartame or sucralose or whatever that was going to kill those lab rats would be like you or I drinking 800 diet cokes.
Yeah,
It's like, well, guess what? That's not going to happen. You know what I mean? But I can have a couple, and I'm sure I'll be fine. And it's
yeah,
like, you're more concerned about that than 100. It's dude. It's not unlike what we were talking about, right? That people are worried about the kids wearing the masks at the school and the negative impact that has, and they don't care about them having to hide in the closet, right? Worried about a
yeah.
gunman. It's
And
the same
it's
deal.
take another product that you consume regularly and 800x that. Let's do Tylenol.
Of
Right? Take
course.
800
Oh my
Tylenol.
God.
See
You'd be
what
dead.
happens. Yeah,
Yep. Yep. You'd be
easily
dead.
dead.
You'd be dead. 1/10 of the way there, you'd be dead.
Right.
And I've seen the same thing you're talking about, right? I've seen like one guy who his entire vibe, everything he's all about is about just how these things are going to kill you, and
Mhm.
this stuff is just this product is shit, and it's going to kill you. Like one was like oatmeal,
Yeah, yeah.
and I was like, come on, man, and I'm like, right? It was oat, and it wasn't even like sugary oatmeal. It was like plain oatmeal, and it was like so. It's literally like in the container contains oats. Like those are
Yep.
those are what's contained in this container. Those are the ingredients. One ingredient, oats. Right? People talk about how important it is to eat like single ingredient foods for longevity. Like that's one of the trends, right? The less
Mhm.
processed the food is, the better it is for you. Okay, so here's a complex carbohydrate source that's loaded with fiber, and it has no other ingredients other than itself, but that's gonna fucking kill you. And it's like, and this guy is on there talking about oatmeal is gonna kill you, and it's like, man, or about how oatmeal has the same blood sugar impact as like candy, and it's like, no, it doesn't. Like
Mhm.
that's not true, and like people will cherry pick these studies and try to make them suit their agenda in a way that's like damaging, and they brainwash so many people along the way. You know.
Yeah. Is it the guy who, he usually records shirtless? I think he's some type of doctor. I know he demonized oats, but
Dude,
I've heard
I know the guy you're talking about. It wasn't him,
okay.
but it might as well be because that guy said 100 things that I disagree with too. All these guys too, right? Like they're one of the big things is like more like the carnivore paleo style of eating, right? And the ketogenic style of eating,
Yeah.
and the more and more extreme versions of it, where it's like it begins at a place. Like it's funny, right? Because all of these extreme cult diets go off the rails at a certain point, and before they go off the rails, there's 100 noteworthy, worthwhile things about them,
Hmm.
right? Like, a carnivore diet preaches, well, at the very least, a carnivore diet includes various meats, eggs, and the like as like the foundation of your diet. But then it excludes everything else, pretty much.
Yeah.
And where it starts to exclude everything else, where it becomes too extreme fundamentalist, is where it totally undermines itself and it becomes a cult and it becomes not healthy, right? And
Hmm.
I feel like all of these diets are like this when they become exclusionary. When all of a sudden, like eating a banana is the thing that's going to kill you. It's
Uh,
like, come on, man. Like, it's so obviously not true, you know?
yeah, and they fuck people up in the end because somebody's like, "Oh, I'm going to do carnivore and I'm going to get shredded," and
Yep.
then it's not sustainable. So they come off a carnivore and they're like, "Oh, well, just wasn't strong enough.
Yeah.
I can't even follow a diet."
Yeah. No, of course. And it's like, no, you couldn't follow that diet because you're not, human beings aren't meant to.
No.
And because that diet lacked so much balance,
Hmm.
right? And was so exclusionary in
Yeah.
terms of what you were able to eat. And and it's like one of those things too. Like I remember when ketogenic diet became very popular at first. And I was a young man and I was, eating as a bodybuilder, eating as an athlete, with performance in mind, eating no different than a track athlete might in terms of trying to eat a balanced diet with fruits and vegetables and carbohydrates and lots of protein and healthy fats and occasional junk food and all that, but just like trying to eat like a with purpose and eat like an athlete. And somebody telling me about like ketogenic dieting, like the Atkins diet, as being like their approach to like health. And like one of the things that they're telling me about is how they can like eat an unlimited amount of bacon every day.
Uh-huh.
I'm not a doctor, but like it's so extreme. Like, all right, like okay, so a banana is gonna throw you off track, right? Eating an apple is gonna throw you off track, or having a bowl of oatmeal is gonna throw you off
Right.
track. But eating 4 pounds of bacon, that's good for you. Like, and it just seems so obviously flawed.
Hmm.
You know? And I feel like so much of this stuff is obviously flawed when you're coming to it from a reasonable perspective.
Yeah.
And that's one of the problems. When you're in a cult, you lose the ability to think critically. You
Yep.
know, you give up that critical thinking to the cult,
Hmm.
to the figurehead of the cult.
Yeah,
And
and you see these things, and not many people do the keto diet anymore like they used to. Not many people do paleo anymore like they used to because that was all the rage at
yeah,
one point or another. Even workout routines, think of like P90X.
right,
Everybody did P90X, but it wasn't sustainable,
right,
right? You're working out 7 days a week, killing yourself. Most
yeah,
people aren't going to be able to do that. So what happens is they fall off the wagon and they don't train at all.
right, right. Of course, right. It becomes all or nothing.
Yep.
It becomes
And
all or nothing.
that's what these
And
diets do too.
it's like one of the things is like there's lots of cliches, right? But like one of the things that you realize it's something that I heard and it's very true, right? Is that the most effective diet is the one that you'll stick to,
Yep.
right? Like, is your diet suited to adherence, right? And like if it is, then odds are it'll be the most successful thing for you because you'll adhere to it, and it's not going to be so strict or so exclusionary or so strenuous that it becomes unreasonable for to be a part of your lifestyle.
Mhm.
Can you stick to it? If you can stick to it, then odds are it's going to be effective for you. You know,
Right. And you've probably seen this in training and when you've been training people, like I always ask clients, what exercises do you hate doing? Like
right,
absolutely hate doing.
right,
And whatever they say, they don't go in programs because
right,
they won't do them. And it's
right.
not sustainable.
Right. No, of course, right. That's the biggest thing, right? Is it sustainable, right? And
Mhm.
it's like, I mean, I feel like that could apply to so many of the things we talked about before, right? In terms of just lifestyle in general, like, are these things sustainable? Can you maintain them? Can you continue to do them? Right? It's like we were talking about last episode we were talking about Jack 3D, right? And like pre
Mhm.
workouts that have amphetamine analogs in them and stuff, right? And it's like as you build a tolerance for them, are you just going to consume more and more of them? It's like, okay, so now you're going to be taking 5 times the dose of that amphetamine analog and a gram of caffeine a day, and like that's not sustainable. you can't continue to, up your dose over and over and over again and think that you're going to extract the same results and that you're not initially going to, reach a point of diminishing returns. It's simply not sustainable. And so many of these lifestyle factors that are related to, health and fitness are about sustainability and consistency and being able to stay with it,
Yeah.
Consistency. Everything.
Exactly. Everything.
Yep. For sure.
Where are we at? 1:15. You want to wrap it?
Hey man,
for next time.
It was fantastic, man. I'm looking forward to it, bro. If 1:15 went by in a blink of an eye, man.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, I'm like looking at the clock. I'm like, shit, I gotta go get my kids.
Yeah, no, me too, man. Me too. It's that magic hour. I'm right there with you, my brother.
Yeah.